Councilmember Joe Johnson, and I'll call this meeting of the Community Development Committee to order. And we'll note that Councilmember Christensen and that Mayor Ross are currently present, and that Councilmember Mayhew has asked to be excused from this meeting. And if there are no objections, then we will consider him excused from the meeting. Okay. First thing we need to do is approve the agenda, and if there are no corrections or changes requested for the agenda, then we will consider the agenda adopted. Alrighty. Next thing is public comments. So we do not have any members of the public in chambers, and I do not see any members of the public online. So we will go ahead and move right on to the minutes. And once again, if there are no suggested changes to the minutes, then we will consider them adopted. All right, then we will consider the minutes approved. That takes us to our one discussion item for today, which is a proposed action regarding accessory dwelling units. Specifically an update to regulations related to accessory dwelling units. And there are a couple of main impetuses, whatever the plural of that is, for this. One of them being that we would like to increase access to affordable housing, which ADUs being smaller tend to be more affordable, generally speaking, and plus increasing a little bit of the housing supply. So that's one thing. We are a little bit limited on where we can do it in the city, as we've discussed previously at council and here, but also that the state legislature recently passed a new law that I think has been signed. Anyway, either way, it's likely to be if it hasn't been, relating to ADUs, where cities have to allow them, where they don't, and also some updates to certain regulations related to ADUs that our code is not currently in conformity with. So those are kind of the main things we're going to be chatting about. Let's see, okay, it looks like Community Development Director Arteche is our staff here to help guide us through this discussion a little bit. So I'll turn it over to Community Development Director Arteche to give us kind of the lowdown on what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Johnson. Yeah, so I brought up the agenda bill, and this was with regards to House Bill 1337, which passed through the 2023 legislature. It was specifically geared towards ADUs and accommodating more of the demand for affordable housing and housing in general in local jurisdictions. To help explain how this might impact the city of Snoqualmie, I do have an attachment which I will bring up. It's called a crosswalk. It was prepared by David Goodman, our senior planner. Just one second.
That's what I was looking to see if we had with us.
Yeah. There we go. So this is the crosswalk, which you can see on the left-hand side, you have the reference to the Snoqualmie Municipal Code. And the next column over, there's a brief explanation of the existing code. And then there's the next column over is an explanation of what laws were changed with regards to ADUs, and then a consistency box. So you can see here that a few of the last rows have a consistency box checked. The ones that don't would require the city to take some action in the future. We have 6 months from the date of the completion of our comprehensive plan to update our code to be reflective of this new House bill. That being said, I'd say the most standout component of this new legislation is for the allowance of 2 dwelling units per one single family lot. So that would potentially significantly increase the amount of ADUs that a city could have. And then there are some other requirements that are reflective of old or traditional ADU requirements, such as having one of the two units be owner occupied. So that particular requirement would no longer be applicable.
Thank you, Community Development Director Ateche. One of the things I notice here is on definitions. So we have, it looks like in our code, a definition for what an ADU is, but we do not in our code define what the principal unit is. And then the new legislation does define that. It seems like that would be one of the things that would be a low-hanging fruit that we could simply add to the code. And I picked that as an example, and I'm wondering if we could, as the Planning Commission, as we're going through the process of updating the comprehensive plan, we have some preliminary groundwork that hasn't really reached the Planning Commission yet, which has apparently reduced their workload a little bit. So I wonder if the Planning Commission could start working their way through some of these items that are more low-hanging fruit, at least, and if there are any other sticking points, that we could attack those a little bit later on. I mean, we don't have to do this all at once in one single code amendment, right?
Correct.
So I might encourage that as time permits over the next few months. I mean, there's no reason to not go ahead and get stuff done that needs to get done. And then the other thing that I was wondering about was with regard to the floodway / floodplain situation and having to build above the base elevation and all that stuff. To what degree is that clear in the code for ADUs? And how is it made explicit for homes that are under those restrictions, that they would need to, say, build a ground floor garage and have the residents on top, like a carriage house, something like that?
This particular legislation provides an out, so to speak, from any requirements that would be explicit to critical areas such as the flood plain, the floodway, wetlands, streams, etc.
Okay, what's the out?
that you could essentially, you're not required to adhere to this new legislation when you're talking about areas that are designated as critical areas.
Okay, I see. So you're saying that ADUs are not required under this law to be allowed in critical areas, not that ADUs are exempt from critical area laws.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if we wanted to increase our housing capacity, then still they could build on the lot an ADU if it's elevated. Is that correct?
Yeah, they need a flood improvement permit.
Right. I guess I just wonder, is our code clear right now on that particular issue? Just making sure that, if a resident goes and looks, is it clear that they can build an ADU in those areas under these restrictions and what they'd have to do to get that done?
Yeah, the primary restriction is the flood improvement permit. So if they can meet the requirements of that, then they could get a flood improvement permit and proceed forward with a building permit.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, this is a wonderful, what do you call it, the crosswalk?
Correct, a crosswalk, yeah. Okay. So we've been practicing this table-like format at the Planning Commission level and continue to perfect it. So it gives an easy glance at what the new legislation is and what's changed and what we're proposing, so.
Yeah, that's quite helpful.
Yes, Councilmember Christensen.
So I did have a question on 17.55070G. It talks about off-street parking, and it says with a new regulation. So previously, I guess we had one off-street parking space in addition to that which is required for the underlying zone. But for the new regulation, it says that a city may not require off-street parking within 1/2 of a mile walking distance of a major traffic stop. Do we have anything that would be considered a major traffic stop?
No,
Okay, that was what I assumed, but I didn't know how that was defined. That just has no impact. Okay.
Yeah, Mayor.
So I have a question about the impact fees. And so I know that when you have a new home, you have to hook up to sewer, water, stormwater, and so those are quite expensive. So it talks about impact fees in here. Is that part of the impact fees? And who pays for those impact fees, especially if you're gonna have like 2 ADUs hooking up?
so impact fees for what?
So if you're gonna you need to add sewer, water, stormwater to their,
Yeah, they still have to get water and sewer certificates of availability.
so they would pay for the full.
Yeah, they'd have to have extra hookups. And if they were on septic, they would need, typically that's the health department, they would review it and approve it. See if there was compatibility for the size of the facility that they have right now and any additional dwelling units that would use that.
So can I ask more question?
Yeah.
Was there legislation this year, though, about having the state help pay for impact fees? Was that more for affordable housing, or would that apply to ADUs?
I don't know, I can look into that though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in a similar vein,
Yeah, Councilmember Christensen.
so then to the extent that people are building ADUs, would there also be the impact fees going to the school district as well? Yeah, okay.
Another thing that that I thought was interesting was that accessory dwelling units to be sited at a lot line, or they must be allowed to be sited at a lot line if it abuts a public alley. And I remember on the Planning Commission, we discussed a while back, maybe a year and a half ago, about defining what alleys are in the city. And I think that had to do with the fencing regulations. So I'm wondering to what degree public alley is defined in our code. Do we need to revisit that? Or did they clarify in this new legislation what counts as an alley?
I don't have a direct answer to that, but there are several definitions in the legislation about, what principal unit means.
So we'll
things
see
like-
if alley's in there.
Yeah,
And then kind of along the same vein here is it says, unless the city or county routinely plows snow in the public alley. That's a fun topic. I wonder if, what should I call you now? I guess interim city administrator Chambliss has any insight into the plowing of public alleys.
So, as you might imagine, covering the city's roadway network in hours with 5 or 7, a maximum of 7 vehicles, requires very large vehicles to move the amount of snow that efficiently. And currently, our equipment is too large to operate in the alleys. It would require us to purchase additionally smaller equipment and bring in, additional help to do that at the same time. Currently, if it's a really bad storm, and this year was a really bad storm, once we get the road network open almost completely, there are times where we did go out and use some of our backhoes to attack the snow in the alleys. But that is a very labor and time intensive because there's nowhere to put it. It's got to go in the back of the dump truck and then it's got to get hauled somewhere. So it's not an efficient process. So that's why we save it for last.
As a homeowner at the very dead end of an alley, I am familiar with the snow pileup when it's plowed.
We do try to go through before it gets bad and at least put down the de-icer, so it doesn't get too bad. But there were a few times this last winter that no amount of anything was being effective.
And then also it says that unless the city or county routinely plows. So if one of our HOAs up on the ridge, where maybe this doesn't apply anyway because of the HOA, but still, but if the HOA hires a company to do private plowing, then this doesn't come into effect because this says the city or county doing the plowing. Am I understanding that correctly?
Which one are you looking at?
This one right here. What's the city or county? 17.55 is 0.070.
We have some alley across the street.
The city or county must allow
I don't think we have
to
very
be
many.
cited on a lot line if the lot line abuts a public alley, unless the city or county routinely plows the snow on the public alley. Yeah.
Other questions or comments? And if not, then what I'm thinking is that the next step on at least this particular topic with the new legislation would be to, as time allows, start working with the Planning Commission to start incorporating some of the RCW into the city code. Might as well get ahead of it if we have time. Great.
That's fine. I did have one question, and I don't have a great way to. I don't have a great way to formulate it. Can you address the roof height you were talking about with 24 feet?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Councilmember Christensen. I think the main concern there is that, you know, you wouldn't necessarily be able to, any city wouldn't necessarily be able to prohibit an ADU that would be smaller or a less significant, you know, or have some sort of reduced size, including roof height, than that of the primary dwelling unit. So, you know, in the past, you'd see ADUs that were necessarily smaller and, you know, looked more, I don't know, dwarfed or just clearly accessory to a single family. And now we're saying, hey, you know, whatever you have for your single family primary dwelling unit, you know, must not be any different than for that of the ADU.
There can be something kind of aesthetically pleasing too about having the ADU have the same roof line height as the primary building. Good example of where you could see that is in Issaquah, in the Highlands. There's this sort of a loop that's right around by Blakely Hall, and most of those units have carriage houses in back. Look really nice.
That's a great example, yeah. Yeah, that blends nicely with the existing home, and you wouldn't know that it was another unit in the back.
So then on that, I wonder if, since we say 35 feet for residential zones, I wonder if we would want to, or not, but if we want to limit the height to just the height of the primary building, or allow people to go beyond. I know that we don't have to because we meet the minimum requirements, but it's just a thought that perhaps the planning commission could think about.
Yeah, and 35 feet is typically standard building height for a single family residence.
Right.
So.
Do you have any other thoughts on this?
So I like the idea of going to planning commission to get them really jump on it.
Okay. Then if there are no other points that you'd like to make here, then that is the end of the agenda. So before I adjourn, I just want to ask if there's any good of the order. Okay. Then it is 6:19 and we will adjourn early. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.